anyways, wow, thanks everybody for showing up. This is kind of an interesting time, right? So this will be the fourth time that I've done this presentation this year. And what I find is amazing, yeah, come on up front or do whatever. But what I find is amazing is that how many people actually really don't even understand or know what's going on. So if you guys don't mind, I'm gonna just do a quick poll of the audience here on a couple things. So how many are aware of the fact that the FDA is even looking into this? Are you guys aware of the fact that the FDA is, yeah? Okay, did you know? All right, good. So in the last couple of classes that I've done, nobody even knew about it. And then so you guys probably might have heard about a parallel thing that's going on that people do kind of get them cross-checked around the right to repair. Have you guys heard about the right to repair? So that's not actually the same initiative, but it's kind of in parallel and has had some stuff going on with it. So as you can see from here, I'm just going to kind of give an update as to what's gone on since February of 2016 and all the things that are happening, and then ask for you guys to do what you want with this information and figure out how you may or may not want to participate or what's going on with what's happening in the industry. So one of the things that I want to point out, as you can see here, it says updates to servicing and remanufacturing medical device servicing collaborative community, and collaborative has been crossed out because as I'll explain here a little bit further into the presentation, the FDA has decided to not allow us to be collaborative under their definition just yet, and I'll explain that further as we go through the process. Let's see here, turn it on, it was on. Oh, come on. I should have checked this, I guess, huh? Sorry, guys. Oh man, now it's not doing anything. Say what? All right, well, come on. Come on. All right, well, I can try to keep going. So the next slide is, I don't know why I can't even get it to advance here. All right. All right. Anyways, yeah, so didn't do it. All right. So the next slide, anyways, is really just a quick slide about TKA. I don't know what's going on. It's not working. So, so TKA. First of all, has anybody heard of TKA? You guys, yeah, you've heard of them. You have. I know you have. Robbie, by the way, Robbie Frazier is our newest employee. He's brought on from a sales perspective. So very excited to have Robbie on. But so TKA is actually a company that's owned by another company called the Innovation Institute. And what's really great, and the reason why I went to TKA, you got it? Awesome, thank you. See that, Vanna? She did good. So anyways, TKA is, again, owned by an organization called the Innovation Institute. And so the thing that really attracted me to it is the Innovation Institute is actually an organization that will allow you to basically jot down on a napkin, hey, I think this would be an improvement in healthcare. And then so if the II likes it, they will take it, they'll give you 40%, they'll run it to the ground, get it to retail, and then they'll actually give 20% back to the hospital you're affiliated with, and they'll keep 40% for themselves. They've got 19 products to market today that they're selling in Walmarts and CVS's and Walgreens, and they're doing really great. And it's just because somebody's had an idea that they put down on a napkin. So one of the things that they do is they've also got 18 companies called EDGs, one of which is TKA, another of which you guys will see here today in the show, which is actually our coming out party, HTG, Healthcare Technology Group, that's run by Steve Cannon, and that's it's an asset management program that we offer in terms of, instead of service contracts, you can get this and it reduce your cost by 20%, and you have the option to use whoever you want for service. Two other products that we're starting to offer, which I'm very excited about, is we have an RTLS system, which is nothing less than 75% than our closest competitor in terms of cost and works better. And the next one is around the Ready program, where we will actually come on site and provide resources to actually disinfect equipment between patient uses and then deliver it when it's needed to the nursing. So if there's things like that that you're interested in, let us know. That was a lot longer infomercial than I had planned on, so sorry about that. So let's talk about what's going on with the FDA stuff. So how this started was, and some of you guys, looks like all of us in here are a little bit on the other side of the management side. So in 1996, you guys may remember this first started. by the OEMs and MITA and manufacturers saying, hey, we got to get other people out of servicing our equipment. They shouldn't be allowed to service our equipment. And there was a lot of effort put together, and we were able to thwart it off at that point, and it kind of went away. Well, along comes 2006. And so we're the first time they came out and said, listen, we're losing market share because of these guys. We need to get them out. FDA and Congress said, go away. 2006, believe it or not, they actually came out and said, we're actually losing money because of these third-party and ISO groups, in-house groups. And then Congress, again, there were many of us that were involved and wrote pages and pages and pages of supplemental supporting documentation that said that it shouldn't happen, and they finally went away. Well, here we go. Unfortunately, I have to give them credit this time. They actually came back and said, listen, we need to stop allowing non-OEM servicing of medical equipment. And they're saying it's because we're providing less safe and less quality servicing, and it's having an impact on the effectiveness. Well, this time, Congress can't just dismiss it. They can't just brush it off. They're saying, holy cow, if this is true, then we got a major problem. So with that, I'm going to walk you through what's been going on over the last 4, coming on 5 years, and the people that have been involved in the process going on, because you guys need to know about it, because it could have an impact on us as an industry. It will have an impact on us as an industry, just depending on what it's going to be. So here's how this started. Back in October of 15, Congress was about to sign off on a MDUFA bill, and it was like 700 and something pages thick. And a little paragraph down at page 600 and something was this thing that, in addition to all this other stuff, but this one little thing that said that you shouldn't be allowed to work on you won't be allowed to work on medical equipment unless you have been trained or sanctioned or signed off by or work for an OEM. And fortunately, we are very blessed because there was a gentleman named Rob Kerwin who worked for IMERS. Anybody know who IMERS is? Okay. IMERS is a international organization servicing remanufacturers. And so Rob Kerwin is their attorney. He was present at the Congress, and said, hey, hold on a second. You guys might want to look at page 6 something or other in this paragraph, and because you don't have any idea what you're about to sign. And so they said, oh, wow, thanks for pointing this out. And they so punted it over to the FDA and said, take a look at this. Is there any merit to it? Is there any problems, any concerns? Is there things that we should be worried about? So FDA decides to kind of look into, well, who are we and what are we here for? And, should we be involved with this? And they came back and said, yes, we need to be involved. Is that me? Sorry. I need to shut my phone off. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. They got wind of the fact that I'm doing this. They want to stop me. But anyways, as you can see, their mission and vision, basically the mission says that, there's an expectation that every patient in the United States should have a nice place that they can go to and feel comfortable and safe, that the equipment's there. And, the vision is the same thing, right? It's around their obligation is to make sure that they create an environment that as a patient, we have the confidence to know that we can go someplace and have healthcare, and that you're going to be taken care of and treated well, and that the equipment's going to be right. And so that this is what the impetus behind as to why they felt like, okay, we should get involved. We should play a role in this. So what happens next? They send out. So did anybody participate? It was February 2016. They asked for people to give input and feedback to, hey, do you think there's a problem? Tell us what you're thinking. And they asked for us as an industry to give them what we believe is the definition to 7 very specific words. I keep telling myself I'm going to try to get those written down before I come in here, and I keep forgetting. But in particular, what's really important is around servicing and remanufacturing. Those are the 2 that we need to make sure that we stay focused on. But in fact, there were others that were also important. Did anybody participate and respond to that? Okay. So here's what they got back, and they pretty much lumped them up into these major buckets. And if you read them, you guys can probably figure out who said what, right? So services are already regulated by CMS, certified bodies, Joint Commission, and states. So you guys can probably figure it out, right? That was either an ISO or an in-house program. By the way, if I said HDO, has anybody heard that term before? HDO, Harry, David, Oscar. So that's a new term that's just come out since we've been together in about a year and a half, 2 years, and it stands for Healthcare Delivery Organization. So you know what OEM stands for, and that means it's a manufacturer of the equipment. You know what ISO stands for, Independent Service Organizations, and that's third parties. And the last one is HDO, and they came up with that as in-house programs. Guys like Mike Busticker, Chris Nowak, Samantha Jakes, all these people that are big in-house programs, they decided they needed a 3-letter acronym too, and they came up with HDO. So the in-house programs now refer to themselves as HDOs. So if nothing else today, you take away that little tidbit that you didn't know before. Hopefully you're going to know more. You're going to learn more too. Anyways, as you can see these things, this is where they came back and they started lumping things into buckets. And they started saying, okay, so where are we going to go? What are we going to do? So here's what happens. Based on that, they said, we know enough to know that we don't know what we don't know. And candidly, we don't even know what we know if we know what we know. So they decided that what they would do is, from the white papers, they asked OEMs and non-OEMs to come present to them in Washington at the FDA. Anybody participate in that? Okay, I was one of the people that were there. This is a 5th or 6th or 7th time that I've done this presentation, but just recently I put these pictures in because there's an image here that I need you to understand because it's really important in terms of how we got to where we are today. Excuse me, this is a true statement. So in October of 2016, we all went to Washington and we were at the FDA building, and it was a huge mammoth room, like 6 times the size of this, but about this width. And so up here was like the Supreme Justice Court. There was a table of about 10 or 12 people that represented the FDA and some other bigwigs. Without exaggeration, on this side of the room was the OEM. And I kid you not when I say it was full of lawyers that were wearing suits and ties and had monogram leathered briefcases and reams of piles that they stood there and were ready to completely unload and demonstrate why we are total idiots and incapable of being able to serve equipment. On the other side, and I'm not kidding you, and the reason why these pictures are here, fairly accurate representation. No suits, no briefcases, and not very well prepared, and not unified in any way, shape, or form. However, over the course of 2 days, there were 2 microphones in the middle of the room, and virtually everybody from this side and everybody from this side. And by the way, there were 400 people in this room, about equally representation of OEMs and non-OEMs. And then there were 3 or 4 other rooms throughout the facility that were being simulcast, but they weren't allowed to necessarily be engaged or participate as much. But throughout 2 days, we sat there, and one side the OEMs literally threw up 6 pictures. The one that I just can't get out of my head I believe it was either a ventilator or an anesthesia device. And in the bellows assembly, somebody had taken a wood screw and put it in to hold down the cover to the bellows assembly. Now, they said that it was a non-OEM person that did that and that they jeopardized the patient's life because of it. And I mean, they made a big deal out of it. And they did that with all 6 of the pictures. By the way, none of the 6 pictures were actually life-threatening in any way, shape, or form. And in candor, what we all said was, how do we know that was an OEM that did that? And how do we know that the circumstances weren't that it had to be done at the time? In all of the pictures, it could have been a very, very real situation where patients on a table, they need to get this thing up and running, get through a case, and that's what they did. We don't know, and they couldn't say. And again, they couldn't prove that it wasn't actually OEM that actually did it. So it kind of became a moot point. But I mean, hospital organizations stood up and said, you know, this is my perspective. The OEM stood up and said, this is their perspective. And really what came down to was, it was all pent up emotion without any real hard facts, but it did present a couple of questions, three major things that I can think of that came out of it. One was the fact that there's no hard evidence one way or the other. Couldn't prove it. 2 was the OEMs were taking the position that said that we were not good, but we couldn't prove that we weren't, and that we had ECRI and we had I forget how many millions of records that we were able to produce. And this basically boils down to this perspective. It was 0.00001. So out of a couple of million, and I forget how many millions of records there were actually 6 records, 6 individual records that were actually, that you could say had a piece of equipment that was engaged in it that could have been a problem. And of those 6, only one of those actually was a potential problem. And so, you know, the FDA is like, well, that's some pretty good evidence. And, you know, so at the end of it, the FDA basically came away and said, all right, what we know we don't know is that we can't prove. We can't prove whether we do or we don't. So we need to talk about what next steps might look like. So it was a very interesting couple of days. And if nothing else, several of us came away saying we need to go buy suits and leather briefcases and at least come off as being a little more cohesive. All right. This, in my mind, is one of the things that I'm most excited about, that we should be excited about, that we should be very enamored. This is Dave's opinion. By the way, a lot of this is Dave's opinion based on the fact that I've been involved since day one, and I'm not speaking on behalf of TKA necessarily, or FDA, or AAMI, or anybody else. Just telling you facts as much as I can. So if you look at it, this to me was an olive branch extended by the FDA that we should be very thankful for and very excited about. First thing they did is they came out and they defined service. That is the actual definition as defined by the FDA of what service is. I'll give you a second to read it, or read it while I'm talking. I'm imagining that most of us in this room represents 90+% of what we do every day, maybe 100% of what we do every day. Here's where it gets a little tricky. They then also didn't define remanufacturing because it had already been defined by CFR 820.3, but they said, in fact, we still like this definition and we're going to uphold it as it is. So first thing I want you to do is, do you have any uncertainty or unclarity as to exactly what this says? Are there any questions? So the next piece of what this means is, if what was decided at this point is, we're not going to focus in here. This is not part of the equation. It's not what we're going to focus on. So if you're dealing with remanufacturing, you probably have another issue. You need to go figure out what that looks like. And if you don't have a QMS system and you're doing remanufacturing, you're probably in a lot of trouble, or you're going to be in trouble. But 98% of what we're all dealing with is not here. So we've stripped it away. But we do service. And as of this moment in time, which is approximately, it's going to be December of 2018, I think is when it was. It'll become more clear as I go on. But essentially, we've been defined as service. What we do 100% of the time is service. And service, as of today, is good enough. That they're saying that they were not able to prove that whether you don't work for an OEM or not doesn't mean that you can't deliver high quality, safe, effective servicing. That's a pretty big win for me as far as I'm concerned. I was pretty excited when they came out and defined this. So, but again, it continued back and resonates from this perspective. What they said was, so we feel relatively certain that you don't have to work for a manufacturer and you can still provide high level, high quality, high safe servicing. But we can't prove that you're not. Does that make sense? Right? We think you are, we believe you are, but we don't know 100% emphatically that you are. And is there a way that we can figure out what that looks like? So the next step was in December of 2018, they invited 100 of us to come to Washington, D.C. for 2 days. I'm going to describe this pretty elaborately because there's it's some pretty good information around what this looks like. So day one, and again, I put these pictures in here just recently. There were 10 tables of 10 chairs each, just like this, circles just like that. And they did the best they could to have equal representation at every table. And it went like HDO, ISO, OEM, software manufacturers, as much as they could. Every table had representation of every entity that we could think of in the industry. And then what they did was, for the first day, they gave us repair scenarios that we as a team had to go from basically somebody thinking there's a problem all the way up to resolution and all the steps involved and how each one of us would be impacted and how we would deal with that. Let me tell you something. That was a pretty big eye-opening experience. And there were a lot of people that had some real emotion tied to that, as you can imagine, from the OEM side, from the HDO side, from the ISO side. And then we talked a lot about how we would capture that information and what we would do with it and yada, yada, yada. So pretty good. But the day was, in the morning, every one of us sitting there feeling very cocky, very confident about who we are and how we represented our products. By the end of the day, people's shoulders were calm. They were sitting back and they were listening and receptive to at least hear what the others had to say. And it was really a pretty good meeting. So we wrapped up the day by each one of the tables describing their process, their end results, and what they learned through the process. Day 2, they invited 25 of us, I think is what it was, 20 or 25 of us, to literally sit around a table in this U-shaped form with the remaining 75 people sitting out in the audience, such as this. And we spent 3/4 of the day, we spent about 25% of the day as this team up here, kind of talking about what we went through and what we might consider changing in what we do to augment and continue to support the service aspect of what we talked about. Then we spent 75% of the day where the remainder of the audience, including ourselves, could say, well, how are you going to do with this? Or how are you going to do with that? Or how are you going to do this? And what are we going to do with it? And a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of questions. And it was really a really great dialogue, and a lot of stuff came out of it. But at the end of the day, this is the most important piece. The FDA, who was sitting at the top of the table, decided this. Based on everything that we've taken in between the white papers, documents, and the request for information that we asked for, based on the meeting that we had in DC for 2 days, based on the results of today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go forward and we're going to create a medical devices servicing collaborative community so that we can figure out how we can validate that what we believe to be true is true, that in fact, you don't have to work for a manufacturer to demonstrate and to provide safe and quality servicing. So we're going to create a medical devices servicing collaborative community initiated by the FDA with the idea that we're going to now be able to figure out ways to demonstrate it. And so we got together at the AAMI office and we had 25 representatives that were made up of of what they decided was with the 25 of us would represent the steering committee. And so the steering committee, we broke it down into 5 major categories, right? There was the OEMs, which also included MITA. I don't know, does everybody know who MITA is? So MITA is, I forget what it stands for, Medical Imaging Technology Association or something like that. But they're represented by 140 organizations worldwide. Today, they're spending in excess of $5 million a year lobbying Washington to try to get us so that we can't service medical equipment anymore. We don't have anything like that on our side. So they're getting noticed, they're getting heard. But anyways, they had representation, and there's supposed to be 5 categories. We had the independent service organizations. So it was myself and Eimers. There were 5 of us. There were healthcare delivery organizations. So Samantha Jakes, Mike Busticker, Chris Nowak. Regulatory associations, we had Joint Commission DNV was there. And we're trying to get some patient advocacy, right? So we want to see if we couldn't get like AORN or nurses or whatever the case is. So anyways, we got together, we met in Washington at the AMI meeting, at the AMI office. And so we got together, we had a good day, had a good meeting, and we established the fact that we ultimately would be 25 individuals, representing the 5 individuals in each of the 5 categories. We would have voting rights. We would create a steering committee, and we would start to try to make things happen. Interesting things happened from here. This in itself, from my perspective, was a great start. We had a setup meeting in December. We had some good dialogue. We had some good ideas where to go from here, and we would move forward. What ends up happening is, I'm actually going to go back for a second. What ends up happening is we spend a year and a half having in-person meetings and phone calls and never able to resolve the charter or what it was that we were trying to object. And in all candor, it was the OEMs against the rest of us. They were absolutely inflexible. They would not waver. Oh, the other one was the charter and intellectual property. We were trying to resolute on a few things, and every single thing that we said that we wanted to do that was going to help us get to the next level, they would say that would invoke on intellectual property, and so we won't allow it and we won't participate. I mean, it's just for 18 months was a complete stall. We were on the charter. We were a word. We would spend 2 meetings on a word because it would have implications. I mean, it was just, it became very obvious it was a stall tactic. A couple of things. So this slide actually should be up higher, but it goes to the fact that they broke them up into 2 categories: remanufacturing and service. And that servicing, which is what we do at this point, there wasn't demonstrated evidence to say that there was a problem, that they would allow us to keep doing what we were doing. So at that point, the FDA said, look, we're trying to boil the ocean. We're trying to solve world hunger. It's not something we're going to be able to do overnight. So let's try to boil it down to something that was more manageable, that we can do something with. And so they decided that they would primarily look in 4 major categories. The first being was around the adaptation of a quality management system. So I don't know if you guys had heard this or were aware of it, but the FDA had actually decided that they are going to invoke and become ISO certified 13485, and that they were going to make it so that every one of us would have to do the same thing. I'm just going to grab a water real quick. So anybody else want one? So what they decided was that 13485 was going to be what they were going to succumb to, that they were going to invoke that in their own establishment. They were going to become certified and registered that way, and that they were going to make every one of us, regardless of HDO, ISO, OEM, third parties. And by the way, from my perspective, there's 2 levels of ISOs, and I'd appreciate your guys' perspective if you agree or disagree. So there's the ISOs like myself: Sodexo, Crothel, Aramark, Trimatics, ABM, Intermed, TKA. That's an ISO. We're an independent service organization. We come in and we take over an HGM program. But at the same token, you all use ISOs because you have specialties that they come in and they do CTs, they do MRIs, they do ventilators, they do anesthesia. Those are also ISOs. There are servicing organizations that only focus on one particular area, but it's still an independent service organization. We usually sometimes call them third parties, but that's still an ISO. Say what? Yeah, right. But they are also ISO and represent.
Large company that goes by 2 letters, they're sitting at the table saying, nobody can service this but us, but yet X amount of their business and their revenue comes from.
And employees, direct employees are servicing.
So for those of you that might be listening, you couldn't hear that. So that's a great observation, and it was noticed it was noticed very early on our side as well, right? So here's the situation. You have GE and Philips in particular. Siemens doesn't do it. Siemens outsources everything because they have to, because of what happened in the lawsuit they had 30 years ago. So what ends up happening is GE and Philips, they have their own stuff that they only allow, you can't service as well as they can. They can only do it and do it right. But yet on the same token, they have huge divisions. Philips at about 150 million, GE at about 600 million, that they're doing everybody else's stuff. So the reality of it is, but this goes to show you how big they are and how disjointed they are. They're literally about to shoot themselves in the foot. If this actually was to happen, they would lose, all that business because they would say that they couldn't do it. So that was always an issue for me that I never understood where they were going. But I just think their perspective was, if they could win this battle, they would either A, get rid of that other pieces of information and be okay because they'd win back so much from the other side that would be valuable to them, or they would say that they could figure out a way to get the service manufacturing training from the others because they would share that back and forth. I never know exactly what was going through your head, but there obviously had to be something. They were either completely, lost their head, or they had something in the back of their head as to what was driving it. Anyways, going back to this, the QMS quality management system, like I said, FDA had said, this is what we're going to do. We all said, okay, if that's what you want to do, but there's some things that you have to be mindful of. One, to get to ISO certification, it's a fairly expensive process, right? I mean, depending on who you are and what you have for resources, it's going to be somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000. And it's going to take you 12 to 24 months and, dedicated resources. And that's assuming that you have resources. If you don't have a resource, now that's an addition. You got to go get that resource. So there's some significance to it. And if you're a small ISO, essentially working out of your garage, which doesn't mean you're not good, it just means that that's what you want to do, you probably couldn't do this. This would be cost prohibitive for you. And it might put you out of business. And then the other thing, which is, again, one of the things that I very much commend the FDA for, and I really appreciate about them, is they soon figure out, wait a minute, if we mandated ISO 13485, then we're saying that everybody else sucks. And that's not fair, because there are other QMS management systems that are okay. So that's when they decided, all right, here's what we're going to do. Through the steering committee, we're going to ask you guys to go find out what are the tenets of a QMS system, 1345, 9001, EQ 56, you name it. What are the pieces of that are relevant to servicing of medical equipment in healthcare that we could say, like a joint commission, show me that you're doing this, that would say that indicates that you're providing safe and quality effective management. So there's a committee that's been put together to focus on that. Interestingly enough, the chair of that was Peter Weems, who works for MITA. And we'll just leave that like that for a second. I'll explain it in a minute. Okay, so the next one, the clarity between the difference between servicing and remanufacturing, which we did. We got that one done. And then these are the different pieces of it that we got to talking about specifically to those activities around what that looks like. So then next one was around strengthening cybersecurity. So there was a lot of discussion about this, and I listen, who's not impacted by cybersecurity in healthcare today, right? But here's my piece, and I'll take credit and blame at the same, depending on your perspective of it. I got us to get rid of this. I had this one removed, and here's my reason why. I am not sitting here and for a second to tell you that cybersecurity isn't a major important issue. But my concern is twofold. One, first of all, there is all kinds of money and resources and time being allocated to this outside of what we're doing. Secondly, what I'm concerned about is it's a component to safe, quality, effectiveness. It's not the piece. It's only one piece of it. And what happens is this was going to become the big thing, and then we would lose sight of the overall program. So what we agreed to do was remove it from the process, and we have individuals that participate on other national committees that are dealing with this, and they report back to us and demonstrate that, what's going on with that and what's happening to what that's all about. So that one I'm very happy about. And then the last one is foster evidence developed around access to quality. So I actually chair that. So that's a committee. It's called the Kpi Metrics Committee. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find KPIs things that we're already doing today that we could demonstrate through dashboards that we would present to any regulatory body and or our clients and or the universe to say, look, I'm measuring myself against these things, which we believe as an industry demonstrate that I'm providing safe, quality, effective servicing. And so as a subcommittee, which Chris Nowak, Mike Busticker, several other people participate on block imaging. I can't think of them all right now. Courtney, Nanny. There's about 12 of us that are on this committee that I'm chairing. That we came up with 22 KPIs that we said some or all of them in some fashion. If we were to measure those as individual entities, HDOs, ISOs, whatever, would say that we believe in the program and that we're trying to demonstrate that we're providing safe and quality effectiveness. So right now there's 4 of them of the 22 that we are actually, there's 6 of us that are providing our data. TKA is one, Chris Nowak, Block Imaging. There's 6 organizations, Courtney Nanny through, I think, what's CHI, I think, whatever they're calling themselves now. But we're going to put all of our data in together. Sorry. That's it. Thank you. So we're going to put all of our data together and we're going to spit out an average. And then we're going to talk about maybe some SDs, like standard deviations. And we're going to say, look, we're advocating based on this information that we think for mean time between failures, an example, we think it, this would be a good number. And so it would help us drive our industry in that direction. So we're pretty excited about that. And we're pretty close to rolling some stuff out. Well, there's 22 that we came up with that we think could be meaningful and valuable. We didn't want to go to the industry with all 22 of them at once. So we're starting with 4 and we're going to see if people can get on board. Well, I'm about to do a Dave Francoeur runoff here. Here's what I think has been our problem since at least the 35 years that I've been in the industry. We have hurt ourselves. And we've hurt ourselves under the word or the hiding behind a shield, if you will, called differentiation. So whether you're an OEM, you're an ISO or an HDO or something in between, every time we've had an opportunity to come together collectively to do something that would be for the greater good of the industry, somebody throws up their hands and says, I'm not willing to participate because that then takes away my differentiator from my competitors. I won't share with you my PM compliance records. I won't share with you my mean time between failures. I won't share with you my downtimes because that's why I can sell against Sodexo. That's why I can keep my in-house program from being outsourced to the ISO third parties. And so in an effort to try to keep things close to the vest and try to protect ourselves from outside entities, in any way, shape, you can do that from an OEM to an in-house, from any different direction. Every one of us talk about the fact that, well, that fringes on intellectual property, and that's my differentiator, and so I won't share the information, and we're killing ourselves because the OEMs are willing to do that because they're not threatened by the others. It's not what's going to make a sale or break a sale, and that's why we're not cohesive, and it's hurting us. And if we don't figure it out pretty soon, we're going to be in trouble. So that was my tirade for a second, sorry. Well, they obviously are. Yeah, I mean, look, a couple of things. Anybody know how big this industry is? Guess. Yeah. Yeah, it's about $11 billion. That's a pretty good sized number. And so right now we're hurting them, right? I mean, so you guys know as well as I do, before COVID, hospitals were hurting. I mean, a good hospital today runs on 3%. That's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of margin. And when you think about a lot of hospitals have been around for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, they got infrastructure issues that they got to deal with. They got safety. In California, they had to revamp every freaking hospital to be ready for an earthquake. There's a lot of money going into IT, cybersecurity, infrastructure. And oh, and by the way, we also need some new medical equipment, which most hospitals don't have and they don't have enough to get what they want. So we have to figure out how to keep this stuff running longer. So OEMs are losing money on the front end because they're not selling the equipment. And then on the back end, the equipment's lasting longer and being serviced by other people. The Avantes of the world, the Tri-Imagings of the world, the TKAs of the world, the Sodexos of the world, they're losing a lot of market share, and it's killing them. And so they're doing everything they can to claw back as much as they can. So the two ways they're doing it are on the sales side, they're going in and they're wrapping up hospital systems for 15 to 30 years. They're going in with this program that says, you hire us, we'll take care of everything, and we'll make sure that all your technology is updated every 5 years or so. So we'll give you new CTs, we'll give you MRIs, and they're locking up for 15-year deals. Well, and here's the thing, right? So if you're involved in one of these things, do what you want to do. I'm just telling you, be careful what you get into. Anybody ever lease a car? So what they do is they come in and they write you a nice big fat check, and they buy everything. They buy all your assets. Great, wow, look at all this money. I build my infrastructure, I do all kinds of stuff. 3 years later, all of a sudden, you're not happy with what's going on. Because they're not doing what you said they were going to do, and they're not doing it the way they need to do, and you've changed your mind a little bit, and they're not coming on board. It's going to cost you more. You ever try to get out of a lease? Can't do it. And the second thing is, even if you could figure out a way to do it, remember all that money that they gave you and you went and spent? You need all that back because now you got to go buy all that equipment back. No hospital in the country can do that. So you're screwed. Go down that road once, you can't come back. There's all kinds of organizations that are really in trouble right now because of it. So these are just some things around different things that we did, right? So this is usually a point where I say, so has any of this resonated? Has your life been changed or impacted at all by any of the stuff that I've talked about today? Just looking for feedback. I can't understand you, sorry.
No, yes. Overall, just like you're mentioning, supported equipment, ISOs, and things like that. Wild thing we all are doing. We got software.
Yeah.
Because all of the devices we have installed today, we process certification. You end up sometimes backwards.
Yep.
Windows 7, Windows XP.
Yep.
You end up having to go back to processes of buying right now. I've noticed a lot more people just coming out on shorter notice and, oh, by the way, all funds should have budget for X.
Yep.
Line Z.
Yep.
Healthy system.
Yep.
You might be able to predict if you're in a, end mountain.
You feel like every other hospital in the country, most of them are struggling. Yeah. And I mean, look, is there an organization in the country that has more money than they know what to do with? And is there a piece of medical equipment that's not tied back to IT in some form or fashion? I mean, it's all going to play a part. It's all going to be an impact. So anyways, as I told you, those are the 5 categories. Currently today, believe it or not, we're missing a couple people in these seats.
Slide for a second. Your second point there, how are you promoting quality services, servicing practices? So there's a number of ISOs and in-house departments that are very active with quality processes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to challenge the OEMs, right, to validate their quality servicing. Everything is focused around their quality practices at manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
We've all, probably everybody in this room, has been in the room with an imaging ISO at some point and saw how that field service representative did it.
Yeah.
And
Or didn't.
You know, and you can see what the PM procedure is and what the PM, that's not just imaging, it's a variety
Mm-hmm.
of things. Primarily, field service technicians focus on outputs. They don't focus on all of those items that are listed in them. But yet, you know, how are it's always outside parties that have to validate that they're doing things to them. The OEM should not be given a pass because they are.
Couldn't.
And especially when we're looking at, spend some time in manufacturing. And, I looked at when they want to go in and manage other contracts, not necessarily, they don't have to manage processes.
Right.
So back to the quality,
service and practice that they don't even have. And they're out there implementing.
Maybe with the definition of service now, we can actually bring that quality to that area instead of just getting it passed.
Yeah, how do you truly manage that process? Because that's really, if you back it up, back to those independent modality specialists and the OEMs, you're managing all that process, either in-house or independent form, but the manufacturers aren't.
All right. So great points. We agree completely. And so what I would say to you is, first of all, from the OEM side, I can tell you their perspective is we're ISO certified, so that already proves it. But to your point, it doesn't prove it. And what I can prove, and what we did prove to the FDA on numerous occasions, is you actually go to some of the manufacturers' manuals, the service program that they're recommending is using test equipment that doesn't even exist, that you can't get a hold of anymore. That, you know, there's processes and procedures that aren't even relevant to the modified equipment that they've put out there. And so there's a whole bunch of things that on their end, they're actually not doing a very good job on either, which is work to our benefit. But those are the things that we need to manage. And, you know, so yeah, I mean, those are things that and that's why I believe if we get to the KPIs and everybody has to produce them, including the manufacturers, yeah, you're going to see them. Yeah. Yeah. Or repeat failure analysis, downtime. I mean, all that stuff. GE can't use your mathematical wizardry in terms of what's considered downtime, right?
Can anybody present procedures they know blatantly are not being done by an OEM? And kind of the shame is I think it went to a blind eye, but I went out and found a couple Phillips procedures.
Yeah.
Where basically you had to rewire an entire cabinet.
Right.
Once every 5 years.
Yeah.
And I took the procedure, and George was leading practice in Carolina. You know, and I said, George, you asked for it, here you go. And it's still blatantly obvious in these manuals.
Right.
It's hard to get that there are these procedures that aren't done. I know they're there.
Yep.
And a lot of higher administration don't know that they're, you know, it's realistically, they're so weird that nobody will shut down a lab.
Yep.
5 days. Lose that revenue.
Well, they're also using software that's not working.
Right.
That's outdated. It's not working. So I mean, there's many ways to go back to the program since they want to poke holes at an ISO.
So, yep.
For 3 years. And so we use it. And it's the same device we were using as out of support that we calibrate.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Like I said, I mean, people don't realize though, I mean, we don't realize how close we are to possibly losing our jobs. I'm telling you, it's worse than you think. So here's the 5 that we talked about. We're actually still looking for, you know, because, well, here's what happened. 2 things have happened recently that I didn't share with you yet. One is FDA said, listen, we're no longer going to allow you to call yourselves collaborative, because in order to be collaborative in our eyes, you have to apply to us to be considered a collaborative community, at which point you have to meet these certain criteria and do things a certain way. And so they took it off, and we are in the process of applying for it so that we can put it back. So, but that's again, whoop, little bump in the road, step back, hopefully to step forward eventually. The second thing that happened, which I find interesting, is, so as I told you, we were 18 months in just trying to define the charter and the voting rights, and and MITA and Aviomed pulled out. They resigned from being part of this program, which I find interesting. What's even more interesting is the reason that they did it was because the committee was too slow and didn't get anywhere, which was because of them. So since they've left, we've ratified the charter, we've agreed on the voting rights. I mean, we did it all in one meeting. So it just goes to show you, they have a hidden agenda, and they're working on it. Yep. This is actually the people that are there. These are the people that we're missing. We're missing some people here. Missing, I guess the OEMs, but you can see these are actually the people. And by the way, if you want to participate, you can. You can't be a voting member, but if you want to just listen in on the calls or do whatever, you have that right. So real quick, I want to show you in our first meeting, I'm a picture guy, right? I learned through pictures. So we hired a group to come in, and this shows what we did and how we did it and what it looks like. And so some pretty cool stuff. I'll just zip through 3 or 4 of them. Yeah, they're pretty cool. Huh? Yeah. So yes, I can either send you a copy of this or you can get it off of their website. It's all after every one I do, they make it available. So a couple of things I want to share with you guys that are new and what's going on. You guys have probably heard about right to repair. And you know that individually there's 15 states right now, 15 states where it's in the court of law to see whether or not they're going to take away our rights or not. Interesting stuff that's going on about that though. Massachusetts just passed in our favor. Oh, but wait a minute. Aviomed went in and said they would back it and support it and get it processed if, and this happened, you pull medical equipment out of it. So it only refers to cars. So we're screwed, potentially, could be. Here's the other thing. These two guys, these two senators, Ron Wyden and Representative Yvette Clark. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. They have put together a mandate right now because of COVID. Manufacturers are mandated to give us what we need. And I've got my brethren and representatives across the country all excited because they think this is a win. This is great. And it is. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but it's because of COVID. COVID goes away, this goes away. Yeah. So, you know, yeah. And so that's where we're going to, so, and what I'm afraid of is we're actually inching in the right direction. And when COVID goes away, we may actually go back to where before, earlier than where we were. So we got to be really careful here. I'm not trying, this is great. It is great. But let's not lose sight of what it's about and what it could mean down the road. So we just have to be diligent about that. Okay, here's what this next slide is. This is Dave, right? We're going to do a Daveism. I honestly believe this. I've been saying this since 1996. I'm still saying it, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. All right. This isn't going to work unless we work together. This is OEMs and ISOs and HDOs and everybody in between. We've got to work together. I believe we have to work in these 5 major categories. 5 major categories, right? It's around, we got to have the right skill set. We can't be successful if we don't have the right resources and they don't have the right skill set. We agree to that. We can't, come on. You can't tell me that you can just take anybody and let them go fix anything. So we have to agree to that. Resources of bodies. First of all, if you guys aren't aware of it, how many people are in this industry? Does anybody know? 45,000. You want to know how many are going to retire within the next 3 years? Over 20% of them. We will be 8 to 10,000 short in the next 3 years. If you think you're going to keep doing business the way you're doing it today, 3 years from now, and have 1/3 less employees, not going to happen. Better figure out how to re-engineer yourself. I'm telling you, this is just facts. Parts, if we don't have access to good quality parts, it doesn't matter if we can service it. Tools. Okay, my brethren that are representing part of this meeting are saying, we just need software keys. I'm scared to death. I keep saying, stop saying that. Stop saying we need manuals and software keys. Because you know what? If I'm an OEM, I'd say, you know what? Fine, I'm done with it. Take your software keys, take your manuals. What would you do 5 minutes later if you were a manufacturer? Change it. Come up with some other roadblock. So I'm saying, stop saying what we need and say we need access to be able to service the equipment at the level of the OEM, whatever that is, today and in the future. Man, I can't seem to get people to get on board with that. Location, obviously, geographic. We need to have enough people to be able to service it when we need it. Here we go. You ready? Here's my favorites. What do we want? We want to be able to do 100% of everything. We want to get rid of the OEMs other than to sell us the equipment. Probably not going to happen. What do they want? They want the same thing. They want 100% of doing the service and never have us involved. Probably not going to happen. Probably going to fall somewhere in between. Here's my prediction. Here's my statement. I've been saying since 1996. I'll still say it today. And if I could make it happen, it would be my last dying breath. Every one of us in this world, in a healthcare environment, in whether it's a hospital, acute setting, a surgery center, an imaging center, doesn't matter. Every single person in this world that has a piece of medical equipment, go buy a PM only contract. Just buy a PM only contract from every manufacturer. Then what we do is we say, I have a video camera and I have a calendar. I expect you to come in the scheduled time and do it as your book says, because I'll be videotaping you. And within 6 months, I promise you, I'd be willing to bet my life on it. They'd be calling us back saying, okay, time out, how do we work together? They don't have enough resources. Their manuals aren't even accurate. They would not do what they're supposed to do, nor could they do it. I promise you, they would be back working and saying, how do we make this work? How can we work this? No, they would collapse. I'm telling you, in 6 months, they collapse. I can't, I mean, I know it would never happen because people wouldn't do it, but I promise you, we could turn this thing around in 6 months if we could all make this happen. That's my guarantee. All right, where are we at today? As I told you, I'm sorry. No. No, well, it is one of them, but it's not one of the initial four. So here's where we're at real quick from a steering committee perspective. Aviomed and Mida and Philips have resigned. Imagine that. All three OEMs that created this horse shit have actually oh shit, I probably wasn't supposed to say that. That created this, they've backed out. The four subgroups that we talked about are still steadily going and doing some pretty cool stuff. Where are we going? Well, we ratified the charter, imagine that, in one meeting. Shore up industry representation, continue our four subgroups, and establish the steering committee, which we've done. Yeah, so Steris is on there, and we've got 2 or 3 others. I forget them offhand, but yes. And Steris has been a phenomenal representative because they're like, you know what? We're an OEM, but we're also an ISO, and we get it. And so it's been great. And they agree. Yep. Yep. So here's something I'm hopefully going to tell you something maybe you didn't know. Are you guys aware of the fact that this just came out by the FDA? There's this little box right here. Was this device serviced by a third-party servicer? Anybody that deals with the mod, that's a new thing that has to be done. Now, many of us are very scared about what this looks like for many reasons. First of all, what does that mean? Serviced by a third-party servicer. And was it only the last time? Or, I mean, it's, oh my God, it's created, to me, well, there's another question. So, we as a steering committee have wrote back to the FDA and said, listen, we applaud you for what you're trying to do, but man, you went not a good way. So we're trying to help work with them, but no idea. But you guys should be aware of that, because you'll be in default if you do a mod report and you don't fill that out, and if you don't fill it out properly. And what scares the shit out of me is they're then going to take this data and make decisions. And the data won't tell you anything because we don't even know how to answer that. I don't even know how to answer that. What if you do it as in and out? You're an HDO and you service it. Are you third party? Yep. As I said, I'm telling you, this is going to create more. This will become more of a problem for us than it will be good. I promise you. And that's right. That's exactly right. So I'm telling you, just be heads up. This just happened. So I was telling you that right now there's 15 states that are going on it, but it looks like we're winning, but beware, like I said, Massachusetts, they pulled the medical thing out, so didn't do anything for us. Did you guys know this? Right? This is huge. This big organization that never lets us get anywhere, they're being sued. And depending on how that goes, this may play a big factor in what happens to us. So this is huge. So with any luck. So we talked about this. Telling you, 8,000 people, 8 to 10,000 people in the next couple of years are going to be short. And you're not going to be able to have guys and gals standing around waiting to do PMs. Not going to happen. Yeah. Servicing personnel within the United States OEMs, ISOs, HCOs, third parties, all that. It's about 45,000, 40, 50,000, whatever it is. But like I said, I mean, many of us, I mean, I'm not looking to retire, but I'm also looking to get out. I've had enough. I'm burning out. But I mean, you know, it's, and by the way, if you guys have dealt with millennials, no disrespect, but all these people that are leaving are taking all that property with them, all that brain power, all that knowledge. They're going out the door. You better scarf off as much of that as you can, because the newer ones coming in, I'll just leave it at that, don't have that expertise and candidly just don't care. It's just a different world. And I've been saying forever that our toolkit needs to change. What we teach people needs to change. You know, when I started out in this field, you could actually grease a ball bearing, you could adjust a 5-volt, you could do things that actually meant preventive maintenance. Today, just like a car, the idiot lights tell us things going to break before it actually breaks. It's board level swapping, where our biggest advantage and the value that we're bringing in is walking the floors and being around the nurses and help them understand that they're not using it right in the first place. That's giving them this false thing of saying it's broken when it's not actually broken. And our opportunity is to teach them how to do that. I think that's it.